Hello everyone, this is Amy Stockhausen. I'm going to do a very short lecture here, introducing you to the field of strategic communication. A lot of this should absolutely be stuff you've learned before in classes prior to this, especially strategic communication theory and practice, but for our purposes I thought it might be good to go through these things again, just to provide some contextualization to put us all on the same page in terms of what we're trying to do over the course of this class. So, let's begin. What we need to think about here in terms of the field is that in general, at least for our purposes, we can divide it up into marketing, public relations, and advertising. However, that being said, making these into stark divisions is kind of a disservice to the field. They are certainly spheres. They are fields in which you can study things you can specialize in, but honestly, the boundaries between each of these is getting murkier with every passing year. It becomes less and less likely that you can choose a single one of these and never deal with the others. So, that being said, we'll look at each of these things individually, but keep in mind that there is a great deal of overlap between marketing, public relations, and advertising. So, to begin with, we'll talk a bit about marketing. Very, very simply put, marketing is the creation/management of a product, a line of products, or a brand. So, we can look at marketing as being the choices made about a particular product to help it appeal to a chosen audience sector or a chosen consumer segment. It can be an entire line of products, so not just one product, but all of the products related to that. Or it can be brand, so the overall company, or at least the name we apply to this line of products. Marketing is concerned with how we best orient that to make it appealing to a particular audience or consumer. And I should say that this works too with nonprofit things. It can have to do with a message instead of a product, or a particular behavior you want to promote. These things work for talking about services. I can promote a hotel as a product just in the same way I can promote the idea of health through non-smoking as a product, or an actual product as a product. All of these things work in tandem. But particularly what marketing is going to be concerned with are the 4 Ps, which you learned back in strategic communication theory and practice. I'll give you a moment. Try and remember what they are. There's 4 of them. And they all start with P. Alright. Hopefully, maybe, let's pretend that you recited all 4 of them, one after another, but just in case you don't have them on the tip of your tongue. The first one is product. So, marketing is concerned with what exactly the product is and what different little choices can be made to make the product more appealing to an audience or a consumer segment. So things like, do we use particular colors? Do we use particular types of materials? Is it something that's going to be recyclable, good for the earth? Or is it something that needs to appeal to a sense of luxury, so it should be made out of rare materials, or at least high-quality materials? Marketing is also concerned with price, so the choice of how much we're going to ask people to pay for this product or this service. Furthermore, marketing is interested in place, so placement. We can take this on a large scale to mean something like, what markets within the country or the world are we going to sell this? Is it meant for consumption worldwide? Is it in a particular country? Is it a region? But we can also look at place on a much more micro level. Where is it going to appear in a store? Where should it be on the shelves? Should my cleaning product be next to other cleaning products? that are like it? Should I ask for some kind of special placement? Does it go on an end cap because it's new and there's a promotion? Things like that. So placement, quite generally, is concerned with where is the product placed. And then finally, promotion. So this will further funnel into things like PR and advertising, but what can we do special to make our product or our brand stand out? Are we going to offer coupons? Are we going to partner up with another company to have some kind of cross-brand deal? What can we do to make ourselves most attractive to the consumers that we are trying to reach? So, marketing within that sphere is going to be concerned largely with these 4 Ps and with promoting their product line or brand in a way that is going to be most easily received by the people that they want to receive it. That being said, we can move on to public relations. And to go back a bit, I think one of the easiest ways to think about public relations and to differentiate it from things like marketing and advertising is to look at its origins, because it was pioneered back in the early 1900s by Edward Bernays. Most people would cite like the late 1920s as being its origin, and this comes largely from a big push that existed among the academic and science world after World War I to try and understand persuasion. So, how is it that you can persuade a country full of people to support a war? Or how can you convince people that what your country is doing is right? And so with this came other thoughts. How do we co-opt this type of science, or, well, this social science, into being something that is positive for industry? How can we use it to benefit our companies as well as our political goals? And so Bernays is one of these people who was able to start figuring out how to use the science of persuasion, or at least the art of persuasion, to accomplish certain things within the private sector. So essentially, what we're going to say for public relations is that it combines social science and marketing to influence the public. So it takes into consideration what goals a company may have, and then uses what we've learned from social science to try and deliver a message that the public will be receptive to. Now, one of Bernays' first campaigns, which I think maybe might leave a bad taste in our mouths, but I think is pretty emblematic of how PR started in industry, is he worked with, well, quite bluntly, he worked with the tobacco industry, trying to get women to smoke. So essentially, what Bernays was able to do was Bernays put together certain promotions for companies in order to make smoking more attractive to women. In the late 1920s, there were quite a lot of public events, women marching for better rights or to be treated more equally than they currently were. And amongst these were, there were flappers and socialites and other women who were very clearly, I suppose, more fashionable and in the limelight. And so Bernays kind of latched on to this. He realized that if he could get those women to be seen smoking publicly, then that would become a fashionable and a popular thing for other women to do. It's kind of equivalent to if today you were to try and get, like, the Kardashians to start doing something in the hopes that people who watch them and who like them will start picking that up as well. And Bernays went for it. He was able to get women to start smoking these. He used the term torches of freedom, and they were photographed, they were put into newsreels, they were shown in newspapers, and it worked. Women started smoking, and it was largely this public relations issue, which is to say, Where this started, where public relations began, is in issue management. The issue was, in general, women didn't smoke because it was seen as an ugly habit. It was something that was not fashionable to do. So Bernays very specifically, very explicitly went out and managed that issue. He changed that public perception by paying women to smoke in women's rights marches, or asking socialites to smoke when they're out on the street so that they would be photographed doing it. And that worked. It became one of the first major successes in public relations. So, what we can take from this is that essentially public relations used to be aimed specifically at managing issues, and in a lot of ways this still crops up from time to time when there's something bad that happens to a company. It's the people in public relations who go out and try to manage those issues. If your company, does something scandalous or controversial, you want your PR folks to go out there and manage the issue. But what has happened since that time, since the late 1920s, as we've refined the idea of public relations, is that it took what we can describe as a rationalist turn. It started to recognize, we began to realize that people don't just hold the reputation of a company, they don't assess it merely based on a single issue. We realized that the way that the public views a company is going to be based on many instances over the course of a long time. So one is not just suddenly irrationally changed by a single event, one is tempered through multiple instances of running up against that brand or that company. And so that brings us to where we are now, which is a focus on what we can call relationship building. So, we build the relationship over a long time period, and so we are concerned with being able to not only reach consumers in times when a product or company does something bad, but to remind them that we're there and to create a personality and a positive relationship that can sustain for a long time. So we can essentially conceptualize public relations as a management of trust. We want people to be able to trust us, trust the company, trust our brand ambassadors, whatever we have. We have the direct relationship between the company and the public. So that's public relations, is essentially managing that relationship. So then we can get into talking about advertising. So advertising is, I suppose the way we can define it here, it's the creative integration of marketing and the communication concept. So what is it that we want to, what message do we want to get out to the public? What do we want to tell them? And how can we creatively express that in a way that people will be receptive? So advertising is going to be interested in things like consumer orientation. To what degree do they already like us? Do we have people out there who are opposed to our brand or our product? And how could we possibly change that orientation? Maybe from being opposed to being neutral, or from being neutral to being positive. So how can we manage that? Market segmentation. So how can we hone in on particular segments of the market, and how do we best communicate to those people? Advertising here is definitely going to focus on how do we use those segments to our benefit. So particular segments require particular types of messages, and if we can figure out what those messages are, then we can reach them in the best way possible. And finally, and this is probably more true now than it ever has been before, advertising is largely interested in niche marketing, which is to say that in the past, we were able to reach much more monolithic audiences. So when there were only 4 channels on TV, it was easy to reach a large chunk of the population because you only had to choose one of those four, and you got nearly a quarter of all of the people available. However, these days, media has segmented to the point that it's hard to get any significant population, a significant percentage of the population watching at any one time. That's why the Super Bowl is so incredibly heavily used for advertising, is because it's one of the few things that a ton of people still watch all at the same time. So niche marketing then is figuring out how to take advantage of those small pieces of media, those smaller audiences, knowing that some of those smaller audiences are going to be far more receptive to your message than others. When you can be more specific about what audiences you are trying to reach, you can be more specific with your messaging. And a more specific, more tailored message should ideally be able to be more convincing. You should be able to be more persuasive if you know exactly who you're talking to. And so these niche segments can become something that we take advantage of. So advertising is also concerned with these niches. Alright, so all of this being said, we kind of have a greater focus these days on what we would call IMCs, or integrated marketing campaigns. The IMC essentially is the conceptual move from having marketing, advertising, public relations all separate to saying that they should all work together in a way that provides one overarching message or personality or tone to the audience it's attempting to reach. So we bring together advertising and PR, and this is exemplified by concepts like the big idea. So if you remember from strategic communication theory and practice, the big idea is essentially a marketing campaign in which you have one overarching concept you want to relay to people, but that overarching concept is broken down into individual smaller messages, with the idea being that somebody will hear those multiple messages, and by hearing the multiple messages over a longer course of time, they will eventually receive the overall big idea. So if I am told that, let's say, a particular car brand is, let's say, it's especially economic. It gets a great fuel economy. It doesn't cost as much to buy it in the first place. It's overall a cheap car to operate. It doesn't require a ton of upkeep. And then I hear another message that tells me something about the safety of the car, how the car is incredibly safe. In crash tests, it does wonderfully. It's a very safe car. And then maybe I hear something about how it can accommodate so many people. It actually is far bigger inside than it looks on the outside. And over the course of these messages, what I might receive from this is the idea that it's a good car for a family. They aren't straight out just hammering home the idea that this is a good car for families, but they are telling me these individual pieces of information that altogether add up to the concept that this is a good family car. And so that's how the big idea works. You give them the details and let them find the overarching idea. And we can also note that with IMCs, the campaign is largely characterized by continuity and strategy, which is to say, it's an IMC so long as there is continuity amongst the multiple messages sent out by the campaign, and that they are all done with one particular strategy in mind. So what does this mean for you? For you, this means that over the course of our class, we're going to be doing things that relate to public relations, to advertising, and our overall products of a marketing concept. And when you are writing these different documents that you will be asked to write, a great deal of what you should be thinking about is how they would fit into an overall campaign. Because while something like a press release or maybe later in a print ad can be a single one-off thing, very often they are part of a much larger ongoing campaign. And so you are going to be practicing the art of taking a campaign's idea and filtering it or distilling it down into the particular message that you need to relay at that point in time. So, I suppose that's the challenge for you. We don't have many instances in this class where I can set an overall campaign for you to work with. But I would like you to be thinking of things that way. That when you're creating something, it's never going to stand alone. It's always going to be part of a much larger process. So no single document has to say it all, but every single document has to be able to integrate into a larger whole. So I want to leave you with these questions, these final things that you have to think about when you begin to craft these documents. You are always going to be working in relationship to a company or an organization. So whether that's a company that makes particular products or if it is an organization that is trying to promote a message, you should be able to ask, where are we? So what is the status right now between the organization and the public? Does the public favor the message that's being put out? Is the company currently successfully selling the product? Or are there problems? Are there obstacles? You should ask, why are we here? So what's happened in the past that has brought you to this particular situation? Are there scandals in the past? Or is there just a history of good products or good service? What is it that characterizes the past that sets the tone for the present? You should ask, where could we be? So what's the vision of the future? Where could you possibly end up? And do you want to get to that point? If everything is going well and you want to envision a future where things are going even better, then fantastic, hold the course. If some things have gone wrong but you want to change the direction, then you need to be asking, how can we get there? What needs to be changed? Do you need to change the product or the message? Do you need to manage the relationship with the consumers or with the audience? What needs to happen? And finally, you need to ask, are we getting there? Always be willing to assess what is the current state of things, and to what degree are you reaching the goals you have set for yourself. So all of these things should be taken into account when you are writing these documents. So if I'm writing a press release, it's going to be important for me to know what my relationship is with the public and whether what I write is going to change that relationship. What can I do in my writing to try and manipulate or, I suppose, manage or maintain the kinds of relationships that I want to have between my company and the public? So keep these questions in mind. They are a good way to guide you, and hopefully they should serve to get your head in the right place for writing these documents. All right, so that's the end of this kind of introductory lecture. If you have any questions about the content, don't hesitate to ask me. Otherwise, go ahead and move on in your module. Thank you.